innovation, interdisciplinary research. For those of you that are new, well, I wanted to welcome you first. We have some new people here today. We don't have a lot of people to present ourselves. Some of us were here last week, some of you are new today. So I'm going to introduce you pretty quickly and you can say hello to the camera if your camera is on. And if not, well, I'll just going to say your names. On the one hand, we have the people from the museums of Quito that work with the community. I understand there are many people with the Interactive Museum of Science and from some other museums. You can say hello to the camera, please. Those of you that have your cameras on, I think it's Daniela, Wilson, Marisabel, David, you're also from my museum. Say hello. Thank you. And well, there's there's a lot of people, right? And I also wanted to introduce you to Viviana Grajales from Colombia. Viviana, please say hello. Yes, she's an artist, actress. She works for me, and we have carried out many processes on how to use art in interdisciplinary methodologies. The rest of us that are here today for new members. We are researchers from the project Tomorrow Cities. Some of us come from the United Kingdom, some of us from Ecuador. I'm an Ecuadorian, but I live in the UK, so it's kind of a mixture, right? So for everyone else, say hello, please, to our guests today. Thank you very much and welcome. If this is the first time logged in, I invite you to click on the bottom part of your screens. There's a says interpretation or interpreting. The sessions are going to be carried out both in English and Spanish, so you can choose the language you want to listen. We have a simultaneous translator here. Where's Caesar? Hola, con todos. He's going to translate from English to Spanish or the other way around, so you can choose the best option for you. For those of you that understand both languages, you don't have to do anything, so you can listen whatever everyone is saying. So I'm just going to start by sharing you my screen so we can have a pretty quick introduction. I think everyone can see it now, right? So today's session is a part of 3 sessions that we have been carrying out, working on methodologies for interdisciplinary research, innovation, and impact. On last week's session, we saw the topic of citizen science, and on this session, we are going to be incorporating the participation and action and experimentation of our research, the science. But we are going to start with this idea of which superhero are you? I mean, we're all superheroes, and I'm going to leave Jerry to do this introduction. That's something he has been working on with Eva for this exercise.
Okay, so the homework. So this is we'll see who from the normal regular attendees has done their homework. So the homework for this week's session was to find a representation of a superhero and to try and share it in some way. So I can see Giuseppe and Elisa. So anybody else, now is your chance to share your superhero with us. Anybody else? Can we see any other superheroes? Part of my initial conclusion is not many people have done their homework. So maybe we all get a grade C to start off with for not doing our homework. But the idea here was to think about what it means to be a superhero. In the last week's session, there was discussion about the idea of superheroes, and what we wanted to do was to sort of feed it forward and think about this idea of what are our own superpowers, and who do we need to work with in order to achieve what we want to achieve with those superpowers. And so most people are now going to have to watch because I think what we could do is maybe ask Giuseppe and Elisa and Teresa to explain their choice of superhero to us and think about which other superheroes they can see in the room they would want to work with. So would one of you like to share with us your choice of superhero and why?
So just a little comment here. It seems that Malena also wants to share her superhero, but she can't, and Alex too. So maybe you can include them instead of me.
Okay. So maybe start with Giuseppe and Elisa, and then we can go around and just hear your thoughts.
Yes. Just a welcome to our guests. I am Giuseppe Forino and I am Italian. So this is the reason why I choose my superhero and my background. This is the Italian version of superhero Donald Duck that is called Paperinic, and is a superhero that exists since 1969 and is a uniqueness of the Italian version of Donald Duck. So I thought that because this is a multicultural project, probably I am one of the few that doesn't come from Ecuador or from UK or from a Latin America country, at least the people who regularly attend these meetings. So because it's a multicultural project where national, local culture means something also when we do research, when we interact with each other, I thought that this Italian version of a globalized comics such as Donald Duck would represent myself and my skills. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll do it in Spanish. Bueno, yo soy, no, tengo problemas de que se vea.
I have kind of problems to show it, but I'm Miss Fizzle. She is the teacher from the Magic Bus. I don't know if you've seen that series, but she has a lot of powers, among those the scientific powers that she can, comb her hair with electricity, and she has all these, earrings and a lot of things that kind of just help her amaze her students. And I think that's one of her main superpowers, how she can connect with her students and lead them to magical worlds, whether it is in the past, inside the human body, and just explain them how the world works. So that's the superpower that I'd like to have from Miss Frizzle. How you can make others learn and discover new worlds from that amazing power, that they can just travel through time or inside the bus in their magic. Of course, that's the other part. They're always in line with the topic of each day.
Alex, would you like to say something about? What about now? Can you hear me now, Sara?
No se escucha.
It's really low, your voice.
Maybe while Alex does it, I also see there are a few on the chat, Jerry, if you check. There's also Chapulín Colorado who has raised his hand.
Y Bombón.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What about Malena?
Pues yo puse esta de las chicas superpoderosas porque
I chose the Powerpuff Girls because a lot of times, among us, among the history team, we have kind of named ourselves that. And generally, I've been used to working with women, particularly in the history section. There's a lot of women. And well, it's not that it's just one that does everything. I mean, we're always getting together to accomplish great challenges. So that's what I like from the idea that it's not just one superhero, but it's a combination of the three of us, of the three of them, that accomplish everything.
And Chapulin, oh no, the hand has gone.
Okay, sí, solo era...
Yes, I mean, it was just to present to you an anti-hero. The Chapulín Colorado is a very well-known character in Latin America. He's an anti-hero, and he characterizes by having a very good will. I mean, his motto is "My shield is a heart," and he's always saying, "Follow me, the good ones." So Chapulín Colorado impersonates a person with a very good will, right? But within the context that he, performs, he is more of an anti-hero because his abilities and his goodwill are not, with the environment that he is performing in. So I think that sometimes scientists are anti-heroes. What we do is not always well understood, and it's not always well accepted. It doesn't really fit within the environments that we work in. And I'm sorry I didn't do the homework, but when I was thinking of a hero, the first one that I thought about was Chapulín Colorado. Thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you. I can see that something's appeared behind Jenny, but I can't quite see what it is. So I don't know if Jenny wants to share with us.
My superhero is Sporticus. Like Alex, I decided to deliberately choose a male superhero, and I like Sporticus actually because despite the appearance behind me, he is very relaxed with his feminine side. He's Icelandic, and I have a huge Icelandic mythology is always very interesting and useful. But the reason I choose Sporticus is because his main thing is that he makes people live better lives by motivating him. He's all about motivation, and that's something that I find very inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So I guess we're always short of time in these sessions, and so we need to move on. But part of the purpose of having this exercise was also to see whether anybody wanted to offer a reflection on how it feels to be asked to do something slightly unusual without really understanding the purpose of that. So does anybody want to share any thought about that before we move on to the session?
Me, Jerry, even if I didn't plan this, so I can comment on it. For me, is generating curiosity. So that is what I like about this, that it generates curiosity and it makes me wonder about other people. And I really like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And learn about others too. So I've learned lots of things today. And also that Daniel likes El Chapulín Colorado. Daniel, maybe you made a mistake today.
Well, okay. I mean, that's great. And that's a great point at which to move on, I think, to what we want to do for the rest of the session today. So thanks to everyone who joined in with that. That's great.
Bueno, vamos a continuar.
Entonces, let's move on. So here's Eva. Eva can't be here with us today, but her and Jerry had developed this exercise considering the superheroes, the female superheroes that Jenny introduced us last week. So building on their first session that was on citizen science, we are going to talk more about the participatory research and how we can create knowledge for change. In the sense, what we want to talk about today and share today is how these practices come from within and to develop and understanding with our participants, the people that are here who have come regularly with our guests, and in general with the people that we work with. That's what we want to think about today, to share with the people that are going to be a part of our project and make sure that our research is possible to understand, that it's sustainable in the long term, and that it's fair, that it has ethical and work principles that can actually produce something positive in the communities that we're going to work with and in the groups that we're going to work with. What are the key considerations for participatory and action research processes? I mean, we have thought about many that are relevant for our discussion and for our work. The first of which is research design. It is not just about methods that are going to be used, but the choices we make throughout the process. It's here where we see these processes put into practice. We make a lot of decisions while we conduct research processes. So we have to align those decisions to the needs and to the decisions that the people we want to work with want to make. The second point we wanted to highlight was the relationship between participants and researchers. It has to build trust, has to raise expectations, good expectations they have to be positive, and they have to create workspaces and discussion spaces, that can move forward. To be clear from the outset about everyone's aspirations and from the objectives, that we all have of why we are conducting this work. The third point that we wanted to highlight is the importance of participatory and action research. It's more than a single exercise. It involves everything from the development of the research questions, the impacts that we want to produce, the knowledge that we want to produce, and how we want to produce that knowledge and that impact. The fourth point is our role as researchers and to be reflexive about it. Are we observers, of what's happening? Are we activists? What's our level of engagement in these processes? I don't think that one is better than the other, but to be aware of it is important. That's what we want to highlight through today's discussion. Point number 5 says, well, what happens at the end? What's the exit strategy? How can we provide sustainable spaces for these processes, for these projects, in the long term? What happens when we're not there anymore? And how can we generate or create or design participatory and action research that can actually sustain for far more time than we are actually there. So now I'm going to share Eva's presentation. Eva cannot be here with us today because she's on holiday, We all have to take holidays every once in a while. But Eva has been very good, and she has prepared a presentation for us because she has a lot of experience in working with participatory methodologies, but with a group that isn't the one we think about first, when we're thinking about these methodologies, which is decision makers or institutions. So I'm going to share her presentation with you where she's going to explain better than I can what she has done. And after this presentation, we're going to move on to Jerry's presentation, then to some questions, and afterwards to an exercise. So let me know if you can hear everything. Good afternoon with everyone. Supposedly, and because I have some superpowers, I'm going to be here with you today without being there today. So the idea in my presentation is to share with you some of my experiences with participatory and action research as main models, with the intention of focusing on the interfaces and on the people who make decisions and create and implement public policy. You know, in these pictures, I want to show you some of the superheroes that have worked along with me, you know, in the search of this mission. They have been public policy, public municipalities, and that I have been working with, and that are still my friends to this day. To start, I'd like to share two experiences with you. Two experiences in which, in different ways, I have worked with representatives from the municipalities. The first experience is a part of the project, in this case, with my master's degree companions, and we tried to act as a bridge between local communities and policymakers in Lima. What's important to highlight is that we organized an entire participatory project previous, you know, to the actual implementation of the project to gather information, and then after having talked with the official institutions, we actually created workshops in which we presented the outcomes of the project. In this presentation, I'd like to share a second experience in more detail, you know, that were where my involvement as research happened in the inside of a municipal government. This experience was part of my doctoral degree in Santa Fe, Argentina. This methodological approach is aligned with some tendencies in climate adaptation and risk management and reduction at the local level, where we focus every time more and more on how to move from the political commitments towards action and implementation. There are two important elements in this methodological design. On the one hand, to build on processes along the way. Before focusing on the methods, I'd like to reflect on what we could call starting points. The first starting point has to do with our positionality as researchers. In my case, this had to do with two aspects. On the one hand, being aware of my previous knowledge of the topic, but also of my methodological preferences. On the first image, I presented myself as Bad Girl, but in reality, I consider myself an Aqua Girl, because I've always been working in topics related to water. And also because being a Pisces, I've always liked to go deep into the ocean and research topics, you know, profoundly and actually delving into the communities I work with. The second positionality has to do with how do we position ourselves in relations to our participants. In my fieldwork in Santa Fe, there was always this ambivalence present, you know. I felt local, but at the same time I felt as a foreigner, and I was seen as a foreigner because I came from a foreign university and I hadn't lived there for a long time. And this has a lot of consequences, you know, both on who opened their doors for me, who had doubts about me, and the methodological possibilities that it opened for me, you know, particularly in the field work in the city. The second starting point is, you know, challenging preconceptions and being open to changing our mindsets. And this applies both for ourselves as researchers and also for those we're working with. The idea of my research project started from a very simple point: sending an email to a generic address of the municipality's risk office. No, I didn't expect anyone to reply, but was proven wrong. I not only received a reply, but the director himself was the one who replied. As of that point, the possibility to perform my research study within the municipality was open, you know. And from that point on, I started working with the Office of Risk Reduction and with the Office of Resilience. The first thing they asked me was, "How can you help us as an expert in risk management?" And in the same way that I was amazed to receive a reply from the municipality, they were surprised with my response. I said, "I'm here to learn from you." And it wasn't a cliche or a prepared answer, you know. It's just that most of the people that I was talking with had been working in urban planification, hydric resource management, among others, for many years. So this idea of changing mentalities, you know, changing mindsets, while doing participatory in action design has to do with the fact that people within the municipality have to be open to being criticized, you know, to receive constructive criticism and being open to work with other people they don't know. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about a few of the processes I used, and at the same time some of the impacts that these methods produced. What happens in the first part? I kind of did a sort of internship in two offices, you know, risk management office and resilience office. And some of the things that I did were the following. I gathered and organized existing data, redesigned the DRM public face website, and wrote some blogs for the municipal resilience blog. The photo you can see up there shows the office of risk management that I worked in. You know, what you can't see is all the boxes and documents that are filed there. Most of the information was written and was disorganized. And to start understanding what the office did and how they worked was based on organizing part of that information. This had two impacts, you know, indirect impacts. The first of which was familiarizing many of the people that worked in that office with a digital repository of municipal information, which already existed, but many of them didn't know about. And the second, and perhaps the most important one, was to visualize the capacities of many of the people that worked there and help them be connected within themselves, you know. For in that way, I was able to connect some of the knowledge from Sophie, one of the girls that worked there, with one of the awareness projects that was carried out by Fernanda. And we were able to create this type of maps to visualize the geographic cover of the workshops that had to do with risk reduction and risk management. And it's something very simple that we did, you know, with one team that worked in the same office. But sometimes you need someone to create a space to think collectively. That's something you need, you know. Another of the processes and the methods I used was participating and giving feedback about existing processes and projects in the municipality, particularly those that had to do with many areas of the municipality and also that involved external stakeholders. For example, I was able to participate in many of the meetings of the consultative board member of resilience. And it was very important for me to be a part of these meetings because I was able to understand not only the processes of how they built and designed plans, but also how different areas of the municipality interact within each other, and also between the municipality and other key stakeholders of the city. In many of these spaces, I was able to say what I thought, to give my opinion, both in workshops and meetings, but also in informal discussions with the people that were participants. In other cases, these experiences facilitated a possibility to create a bond with the participants. Lastly, I'd like to mention a group activity that I organized with many of the people that I'd already interviewed and that I'd met in previous meetings. Really, what I did in this case was assess myself, you know, on an ongoing process that had to do with the participation of the municipality in a pilot project of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Specifically, the group exercise consisted in self-assessment using a tool called the scorecard. Here, I'd like to mention something we mentioned previously. That's the capacity of, you know, continuous learning and self-criticism that people that work in municipal governments have. This was also reflected in a document we wrote with the director of resilience, where we reflected not only on good practices, but also on the main challenges and the things that didn't really work well previously. As a conclusion, I'd like to share with you some of the things that have been useful for me throughout this process, and also some of the main challenges that I've had to face. Starting with the things that I found useful, I'd like to highlight the following. First of all, the importance of identifying the right gatekeepers, in the municipality that are interested in our research and that can open the path for us. Secondly, and thinking about impacts, I like to say the importance to build on existing processes within the municipality when thinking about your methods and impacts. Third, we have to be flexible and adapt the methods we want to use according to the activities and the calendar of the municipality. And lastly, take advantage of existing spaces where the main issues that we are interested in are discussed and to try to participate in them. And to wrap up, I'd like to reflect on some of the challenges that I have faced by carrying out a participatory and action research with municipal governments. First of all, to be associated with a political party or the administration in office. This can have consequences on other stakeholders that we want to create a bond with and that can identify us as allies of the government. Second, how critical can we be and how much can we say in our papers when we have been working and participating within an organization? And well, this is the case for any organization, but it's more problematic when you're talking about governments that have to say to the people what they've been doing. Third, universities are not neutral actors, they're also political players. And this has to do with how the government and the political actors, perceive one another. And lastly, the challenges of doing research and participatory research at electoral times. And this has consequences not only in time availability, but also in the politicization or political use that many people do on many of these topics. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to discuss them with you in our next session. Well, thank you, Eva. I mean, it was a very interesting presentation. Kind of to contextualize what we're talking about, Eva is one of the postdoctoral members of our project. Eva comes from Argentina, as you could tell from her accent, and she has worked in many projects before joining the Keto Hub, and she's working with us in many processes regarding vulnerabilities, capacities, research, but also at the city level with some of the colleagues that are here today. So, this presentation was a sort of introduction to the type of methodologies, research methodologies and action methodologies that we'd like to, or that we're thinking about using in this project. I'm going to let Jerry speak now. He's going to give us a presentation about interdisciplinary methodologies from the physical sciences. Jeremy comes from the physical science world and, has to do with how we have been working in different projects by combining physical sciences, social sciences in this topic of participatory methodologies. So Jerry, you can start, please.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my slides now?
Yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to do today was to share some experiences from some interdisciplinary participatory action research that we've been undertaking in Peru. This is working on an extensive frequent hazard in Peru, which is seasonal rainfall flash flooding, and this work is this work that I'm doing with Teresa, but also builds on work we've previously done with Jenny in St. Vincent, looking at ways that we can develop interdisciplinary participatory activity, and also ways that where we can foreground the physical sciences in this. So the photograph on the left shows some of the communities that are affected by these flash floods and debris flows. They're caused by intense rainfall onto these slopes, and they flow down into the communities. And the communities are a mixture of planned and informal settlements here. So the broader history is that people have migrated into the edge of Lima in order to escape conflict and look for work. And that's led them to occupy land which is in areas which are more threatened by natural hazards. And so I'll show you just a short sequence of one of these hazard events. And these occur during the rainy season, which is January to March, and the thresholds for rainfall that creates these events are well known within the community. So the guy that just moved because he knew that this flood was coming, because they have informal warning systems about these type of events. What you can see as a result of that is that these type of hazards are typically don't cause fatalities, but they cause significant repeated damage over the rainy season to infrastructure and people's houses. And basically they have a sort of long-term attritional effect on the development of these communities. So I'll tell you a little bit about our project and some of the methods that we used. So the structure of the project is shown in this diagram on the left, and it's essentially built around a series of participatory workshops, and in between there are participatory research themes. So the themes of our research are around increasing our knowledge and understanding of the hazard itself, better understanding the experiences of the communities, their capacities and their vulnerabilities, and understanding how the institutional risk management system works and how political decisions play into that. So for people in the Quito hub, then you'll recognize these themes as being very similar to some of the areas that we're researching in the hub project. So the overall aim of the exercises was to find ways to combine knowledges from the community, from the institutions, and from scientific knowledge of these hazard events, because we want to be able to improve prediction of these events, but also crucially we want to find ways to support and propagate community organizations that are focused on reducing the risk from these events. So in particular, an aim of the design is to look at ways where we can support the development of organization within the communities around those events. And in this particular project, the way we bring that together will be through co-development of early warning systems based on both scientific and community knowledge. Secondary aims are to better understand the roles of the different actors, so the communities, scientific and risk management institutions, local government. So what the real holistic risk management system is. And to do that, we need to find ways in our action research to allow people to get to know each other. We need to increase the understanding that institutions have of where the hazards, how important the hazards are in relation to everyday issues for people in the community, and the fact to increase the knowledge of the institutions to the fact that the communities organize their own responses to these events, and those are part of their capacities that they have to cope with these events. So there's a relationship between these types of activities and other ways in which we might assess capacities and vulnerabilities within these communities. And we wanted to find ways to support the communities in their interactions with the institution. So to help empower them through knowledge of both the underpinning science of these events, but also through knowledge, through getting to know people individually within the institutions. And finally, particularly from the perspective of physical science, we wanted to think about how we could embed physical science into these interdisciplinary participatory activities. They're often thought of, action research is often thought of as a social science methodology, but we wanted to look at how we could foreground the physical science and also think about ways in which we could learn specifically about the role of mathematics and modeling the hazard in the mitigation of hazard events. So these are the aims of the project. And on this slide, I want to say a little bit about how we co-design some of the activities. So it's important to recognize that for these frequent events that occur every year, the communities are already organized within themselves in terms of how they can respond to those. And there is an institutional structure there of risk management, which is also organized. So there are already engagements between the communities and the institutions, and very often these are driven by key actors. So, so the starting point for co-development is finding these key actors, and in our project, through finding particularly key actors within an NGO that worked with both the communities and the institutions, we were able to involve the communities and the institutions in the design of the activities through the work of these particular people who were already engaged with them in these activities. And for the activities that I'm going to show you, we worked with a particular starting point, which is the need scientifically to map the topography of the urban environments where these hazards occur in order to be able to characterize the hazard using models. So in particular, this is an activity for which we use drones, and this image on the bottom is a drone map of one of the road networks through one of these communities. And when we use the drones, then we need people from the communities to support us for safe operation of the drones, because we're working in close proximity to where people live. And whenever we do that work, it generates a crowd. There is interest within the community. So our starting point was how we could use this activity to create other forms of participation around that we could use to better engage with these communities and learn from them. So we thought about ideas that were based on thinking about what does this place look like when we take different viewpoints. So we did some activities that were exploring that place from the level of the ground. So we were invited by people from the communities as well. So people from institutions, scientists were invited by the communities to see the place where they live and see some of the physical structure and organization of that. And we did that by walking around. And after we'd walked around, then in groups, we had discussions around what we'd found. And some groups chose to present that in the form of a map. And then we fed back the different maps and the different bits of knowledge that came out of those walking tours to the whole group. And in this type of activity, what we learned, and when I say we, what I mean is what everybody who was involved learnt, was that in this form of activity, there tended to be a very high level of qualitative description of the everyday hazards. So, not detailed, specific, precise information, but a general sense of what the hazard and the impacts were on those communities and those places. People also chose to tell us their stories as part of the description of the places that they were showing that. And through that, we learned aspects of the history of those communities. in particular, people focused on some of the larger historical events and talked a lot about the consequences of those events. And that gave people from the institutions an opportunity to talk about their resources, their plans, and their activities around managing or reducing risk. And really, on the ground level, at this level, what people were really sharing was their lived experience of the place. So we contrasted that with thinking about how we could see this place from the air, so from the bird's eye view, the vista de Pajarito. And the way we did that was by involving people when we conducted the drone flights. And so people were involved, people observed, and people joined in that activity. And afterwards, we explained some of the technical details, and we used this activity to co-create maps, aerial maps, which in some cases people annotated with information. And we used that as the basis for a discussion of the nature of the events. And so in particular, people told us quite detailed information about the depth and speed of the flow and the nature of the flow. So whether the flows carried mud, the type of damage they caused. And we were, one of the exercises that worked particularly well was to then turn the information that they'd given us, their descriptions, into a mathematical description of those features. So writing down the mathematics that describes the flows that they've seen, to bring these people into an understanding of how that process occurs and what is its value for them. And so to contrast that with the perspective from the ground, then what we found is that with this aerial view, people tended to give us very specific time and spatial information about hazard events and damage. They explained a lot about infrastructure that was there and adaptations that they'd made to these events. We also learned about different activities within the community. So people were able to recognize their houses or the houses of particular people in the community who had a particular role. And in that way, we learned something about that as well. And we were able to share about information scientists do and their roles in. This activity was really more around the process of people seeing their role within this risk management system. So it wasn't, we designed these activities with the expectation that would occur, that we would see differences in looking at the communities in different ways, because that was built on some solid theoretical ideas or conceptions. So one of them is the creation of what people call a boundary object. So the co-creation with the communities of something that we both share, the scientists, the institutions, and the communities share and have a shared understanding of this object. And in this case, the object that we created together was the annotated map, which had the detailed spatial information in about the hazard events. And these objects, this map doesn't mean the same thing to me as it necessarily means to people from the communities or people from the institutions, but it was a way of bringing our focus together in a particular activity. And the other thing we also recognized in this is that when you look at something from a different viewpoint, you think about it in a different way, and it prompts different information in terms of recall and understanding. So this is just a fun example. These are two views of the inside of the Simpsons house on TV. And what you can see is that when we look at these two different images, the perspective view and the plan view, we can imagine different types of information that's associated with seeing things in different ways. So we expected these different perspectives from the ground and from the air to generate different bits of discussion and focused around different types of information. So very briefly, some of the outcomes of this work so far are that one of the things that we've continued to do is to work with the community observations and build mathematical models using the information from the community. So we've put their knowledge into the center of the hazard assessment process through co-developing hazard models. And that's recognized by the institutions and the risk management. So we've put into the forefront of this the fact that there's community knowledge, which is a key part of this process. We've got detailed knowledge of the hazards and the impacts, but also people have told us about how they've constructed their own defense measures, and we have an understanding of how those work. But also these activities give us baseline knowledge about what it's like to live in those communities and the capacities of people in those communities. So we're learning about the social context and the impacts of previous events on those communities. And there's knowledge circulating about how observations and some of the underlying physics is turned into predictive models. And that's led to a couple of more significant impacts. So one is about the uptake of models that's driven by community knowledge by the institutions, because the institutions have been involved in this process. But perhaps a more significant impact in the current context is that one of the results of these exercises is that there's now the creation of a community group that's focused on disaster risk reduction, and particularly around these hazards called the red dotted areas. And this has come out of these activities. These people have organized into a network which is aiming to give the community a voice with the risk management agencies. And one of the unexpected benefits of doing this is that network is now supporting our ongoing research in these communities during times of COVID, because this network who are known to us is able to work at the community level in actually getting involved in the research. So that's a very valuable unanticipated benefit of setting up this group. Final points, challenges and opportunities. Some of these have already been covered by Ava, but things to think about when designing participatory action research. It's about finding the key people who can help and facilitate with that. What we're designing is a process rather than any individual activity or answering a specific research question. And the process is time consuming and needs to be allowed. And what we need to think about is, are all groups represented in this? So in particular, in our work in Peru, we need to find ways to better engage with younger people. And the thing that we should always have in our mind is to ensure that we are thinking about maximizing the benefits of these activities to those who are affected by the hazards. And a final point, I think that participatory action research provides a great opportunity for us as an interdisciplinary project, because the activity is not centered on the research of any particular discipline. It's centered on how do we address challenges that face those communities. So automatically it opens a way for interdisciplinarity to emerge from designing these exercises that are focused on tackling challenges. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jerry. Gracias, Jerry. Si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, bueno, Eva no está aquí. Si es que
Thank you, Jerry. If anyone has a question, I mean, Eva is not here right now, but if you have any questions, you can write them down in the chat and then we can get you in contact with Eva. And Jerry's here. So any questions you have for Jerry, any consultation, anything really, please raise your hand. You can turn your camera on and I can let you speak. Daniel, Chapulín Colorado, someone else? Okay, let's just start. Daniel?
Sí, era solamente para hacer un...
Yes, I just wanted to give a short comment. No, it has to do with Eva's presentation, but it goes for Jerry. In her talk, Eva told us about how you politically identify researchers, you know, I mean, their political affiliation and how that can affect sometimes how the municipalities receive us or open their doors to us and even how they can reject us. So that's something that I've seen, you know, I've seen that I think is very valuable, you know. That's something that's happened to us, at least, you know, in our experience, we've always avoided any cost to identify ourselves as from a political party or a political tendency. I'm talking from us as the geophysicist center of the university. So that has kind of put us, you know, apart, has separated us from that type of discussions. And then, you know, generally speaking, that hasn't really affected the political power we've had and the relationships that we've been able to create. You know, in the end, they receive us because we've always had this neutral tone, you know, this neutral discourse, and we have focused exclusively in our work, which is, you know, based on physics sciences. But that's my question. I mean, what's your perspective about it? What's your experience, I mean, with it, and what can we expect for our case as, you know, I mean, as this project that we're now working in and for our future activities?
Should I respond to that? I mean, Teresa may want to respond to that as well. I mean, I guess from the perspective of the experiences I shared with you in that project, we were, you know, our positionality was very much as outsiders, but we were outsiders that were disconnected from any institutions, and in particular, we wanted to engage equally with the institutions as we did with the communities. And we were obviously outside of any of the kind of local political components that are important in kind of financing or supporting mitigation to those hazards. So I think it's a territory as researchers that we can occupy, but I think it's also we can't ever be completely neutral in that because people know why we're there, and people you know that, for example, if we're doing research about the natural hazards in this project, then we are going to be engaged with institutions and the municipality in some way.
Thank you, Jerry. Hay dos preguntas más. Eliana y
There's two more questions. Eliana and Marco, please.
Eliana, primero alzó la mano.
I think Eliana raised her hand first. Yes. Good morning. Thank you for your presentations. They were very interesting. And yeah, my question kind of relates to the last one, because as a university, we have been working in many neighborhoods regarding landslides by gathering data, thinking about methodologies. And of course, when we socialize the data, we have to build these tools so that people know what's the problem, right? What's the problematic in the neighborhood? I mean, why do we have these impacts? What's happening with my house? What's happening with my land? But that has also generated conflicts with the municipality because it's like people already have tools. They know what's happening in their territory. And well, now they have the tools to get organized, and they can now put pressure on the municipality so that they assume their responsibility in the territory, right? That happened to us in an area. I mean, the sewage system was so poorly done. Uh, it was the responsibility of the municipality, right? But the people didn't know that. But then we came in as a university, we gathered the information, and then they knew. So sometimes it's very hard to just say, okay, I'm just going to give them the information and nothing else. But I mean, afterwards, how are we going to get involved? You know, the community kept calling us. They kept telling us, you know, please be a part of the meetings, be there when we are meeting with the municipality, explain the problem. So sometimes that's kind of conflicting for us, you know. Up to what point does my work as research go to, you know, and also my commitment to the community? That was my question. Thank you, Eliana. Jerry, maybe we can let Marco ask before we move on.
No.
Or do you want to answer now?
No, let's.
Okay, Marco.
Gracias, Jeremy, y a Eva también por su video.
Eva and Jenny for their video. It was very interesting to kind of look at the dynamic of the participatory and action research. Also the specific experiences, you know, in both cases. And of course, there's some points that you both share regarding the need to identify key actors, for instance, to properly define the role of those actors, the interaction types. Eva even talked about what happens after the process, you know, in regarding sustainability. So that kind of relates to the fact that each participatory experience ends being unique, you know. I mean, it's peculiar in its own way, and besides the fact that it can be systematized, you know, generally speaking, through participatory methodologies and etc., the process kind of develops itself on the go. I mean, in what way can that be a difficulty? You know, I mean, in what way can the need to interpret each experience, each process in and of itself can pose a challenge? You know, and as a second point, I mean, my second point had to do with the type of participatory action that's performed in relation to, I mean, we were talking about the exit, you know, but I was more interested in the entrance. I mean, who's the actor that starts, you know, where does the motivation comes from, you know, the initiative of participation, where does that come from? Does it come from universities? I mean, in the Quito project, for instance, we're trying to be the ones who promote interaction and participation action, but that can also come from the municipality. And in that sense, participation gains a different perspective, you know, or it can come from the community in the form of a demand. So that was my question: where does the initiative of participation comes from, and what's the path that this takes regarding the interest of each of the communities, of course? Thank you.
Jerry, you want to answer?
Jerry, do you want to answer?
So maybe just a couple of quick responses to that. So I think that the point that Eliana made really comes back to a critical component of design, or trying to anticipate in these activities what the end point of those is or has to be for the different people participating. So this is also about managing expectations, and it's things that we've seen in a number of other projects where expectations get built through participation. So thinking about how to contain that is a really important part of the design. And I think that, just perhaps to reflect briefly on Marco's second point, then I think in in the projects that we've described today, then the starting point has been, you know, the action of researchers or research projects, but it unlocks it's a catalyst for other actions, for joining together other actions that are already taking place, because as you point out, these activities are going on all the time, and for sure in the, you know, in the Quito project, then, you know, the municipality has been a big actor in all of this as well. And so really in the projects we've described, it's been academic research which has, you know, catalyzed joining together people and activities that were already starting to be developed.
Antes de pasar a la última pregunta.
Before moving on to the last question from Ibeth, I'd like to say to Marco and Eliana to also, you know, let you know that in the next session, the next workshop, Marina is going to present a bit more about the theory behind participatory methodologies. Okay, so I mean, we're not only aiming to think or to leave it as a methodology, right? I mean, this comes from a practice, from a theory of how to do things. And yes, Marco, you are right. Each of these has a very unique outcome. As you know, it's very specific to it, and you can't really generalize it. But as a practice, you do base yourself on a theory, you know. And I mean, I'm not going to explain to you, but let's just let Marina explain this to us next week. But it has a lot to do with what Liana was asking us, you know. I mean, what's our role as researchers, and where does this entire political aspect start? Where does it end? I mean, and also what you're saying, Mark, you know, where does this initiative come from? So I think that's a very important question, and please remember it so that we can discuss it more in next session. So the last question, because we have to move on to our exercise. Yes, we're always doing exercises in these workshops. So I'm going to let Yvette talk now.
Hi, Jerry. My question is, what do you think is the role of risk management now during the pandemic time and the sanitary emergency?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of your question, but I think
it's okay.
But I think so. It's interesting in the project in Peru where the situation with COVID is very bad at the moment. Then primarily the risk managers are now focused on the pandemic. But what they are thinking about is that in the spring, so in January through to March, then there probably will still be a pandemic, but there'll also be, in addition, these hazards that are affecting the communities as well. So they're at the moment they're very much focused on the pandemic, but they're starting to think about how to manage both those situations at the same time. So it's a classic multi-hazard problem here that they're starting to deal with.
Thank you, Jerry. Muchas gracias, Yvette. Aquí hay varios expertos en el tema.
Thank you very much, Yvette. There's a lot of experts regarding risk management here. Perhaps through the chat, they can tell you a bit more about it. Jonathan, Marco, Giuseppe, they've written a lot about it, and they can give you some ideas or comments. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, 9:45 or whatever 45, depending on where in the world you are. So at 50, come back so we can start with the exercises. Thank you, and I'll see you in a bit. You can have a short break. Thank you.
Jerry? Mm-hmm. So I have the presentation. Do you want me to share the screen so that you explain the exercise, or?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. What's the time frame here? Because we're running late. So.
Yeah, so if they come back at 50, then we have 25 minutes left.
Do you think we can extend it?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, just a little bit.
So maybe what we should ask is if people can stay for another 10 minutes, and we do 20 minutes in the groups, and then 15 minutes of feeding back at the end.
Okay.
Sorry, I think we cannot extend that much because after this session we are going to have another one, and it's a session with Liz and Eliana about some activities they have to discuss. So I don't know if 10 minutes or so could be okay, but not 20. I don't know. I have to ask Eliana.
Liz is there.
Yes, I sorry, I'm still at my desk and I heard
sorry.
the timings being discussed. So thanks, Adriana. So basically, Camillo, Eliana, me, Paul Vardaniger and Rose, who's our PDRA, we have weekly meetings on the landslide modelling and soils and stuff. And we've got a meeting that had to be scheduled for later on today. It was originally going to be at 4:30. I think it's now at 4:35 because Eliana asked for the translator also to be present for our meeting to help her with, because she's talking about soils with us. So we will need to have that meeting promptly because Paul and Rose both have childcare commitments, and they're at that meeting,
just a
so
question,
we can't delay it.
Yeah, that's fine, Liz. Adriana, are you using the same account for that? Is that it?
Our account, yes. I provide a link.
Okay. All right, Jerry, we cannot have it then. We
Well,
can.
no, but maybe what we can do, because it's the same account, is it? It's not just that.
Yes, but I understand it's that this is supposed to finish at 15.
Yes.
And your meeting starts at 30.
Yes.
So there are 15 minutes in between. We can run a little bit longer. It's no problem. Of course, before 4:30, before half past, whatever. I have a mix of hours. Sorry, Liz, but we
the
won't
half past is the key. Yes.
Yeah, we won't pass half past.
Okay, that's okay.
Thanks so much, guys. Normally we'd have it on Blue Jeans or separate. It's just that
you need the
translation for us.
So. Don't worry, Liz, and it's fine. We shouldn't really go longer than that. It was more like 5 or 10 minutes more.
Yeah.
So
thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Ya se tomaron su break, tienen su café, su té.
I think everyone, got their break, got their tea, their water. So, as with the other workshops, we have an exercise where we separate, in groups. So, if you are visiting us today, we're going to put you in random groups, and I'm going to share my screen. I want to share, yes, my screen, so that so that Jerry can explain what the exercise is all about. Okay, so Jerry, please.
Okay, so what we wanted to do was to try a little exercise where in groups we started to think about some of the aspects of designing some of these participatory methodologies. So the question is to think about how you as a group could design or engage in a participatory way with a particular group to address their risk priorities. And so what we've done is we've divided you into groups, and each group will need to imagine an exercise that they would conduct with a group of actors. And those group of actors include the municipal government, a planned or formal community, an informal community, a private sector organization, and a civil society organization. So this is just an opportunity to have some fun with thinking about how could we try and create an activity for that particular group. What we would like you to do is to discuss, think about, this is an interdisciplinary research project. What elements of interdisciplinarity could we bring into that exercise? Think about the multi-hazard component of the project, and also think about what's new and what are you creating in that process. So what we'd like you to do, so we realize that trying to imagine a participatory activity is by definition it's not possible to do that. We have to use our imagination, and we have to just try and think through this. So we can't explore or experiment with this in the full way, because we're not actually engaging with those participants. But nevertheless, we thought it would be fun just to try and give this a try and to think about this. So in each group, there will be one person who probably has some more detailed knowledge about the groups that you're engaging with. If you struggle to find ways to think about that, you could imagine doing maybe some role playing. Maybe someone from in the group could represent the participants from your target group. And if you go to the next slide, Teresa, then here are some things to think about. What are you trying to achieve? How are you going to design something? And what are the challenges for both the researchers and the participants? Think about trying to imagine what the expected outcomes would be, and and how you manage expectations around that. So what we're suggesting is that in your groups, you spend about 15 minutes discussing and designing an activity within your groups. We can drop into the groups to see how things are going. And then we'll bring everybody back to have a brief discussion about things that you've experimented with in your discussions at the end of that. So there's a Google Doc which we'll share for each group where you can just fill in some notes. So it's good to capture some notes from the discussion. And if one person from each group can give a very brief summary at the end for everyone of the exercise that they've designed, what its intended purpose is, and what elements of activities are involved in that. Hopefully that will be clear. and hopefully you'll find an enjoyable way to explore that a little bit in the groups. So if you can do that in groups, and then we'll bring you back after 15 minutes, I think.
¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? I think maybe Liz has
Anyone has a question? I think Liz has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. I assume we're doing this with COVID in mind as a constraint. Is that correct? Or are we ignoring COVID and being creative beyond that?
Whatever your group thinks, we don't have a particular view about that. It's more just to explore and experiment.
Okay. Voy a ponerles el link al Google Doc en el chat.
I'm going to share the link in the chat, for the Google Doc, and depending on the group you take, you can the link and fill out the information. Just give us a sec for me to find the link. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you to open the link now, because once you get separated into groups, you'll have different chats. So I don't know if you'll be able to continue seeing the link. So just open it, please. Good. So Adriana, please do your magic. Just going to separate you guys, and you'll be gone. And then we'll come back in 15 minutes.
Un momento. Listo.
Ready? Everybody?
And Jerry, can you try to move into the groups? I didn't assign you any specifically. You are muted.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll do that in a second. I just need
Okay.
to respond to something on the chat. So,
We are still here with...
So how do I get into the groups?
Are you able to see at the bottom of the screen breakout rooms, and then you can you see that?
No, I can't see that online.
Okay, I will make you now host,
Okay.
so that you can move.
Go. Or is it good?
Okay, okay.
Yeah. It's good. It's good.
Okay. Entonces, bueno, primero muchas gracias.
So first of all, thank you. I hope all of you got to know each other a bit more. There's a lot of new people, many new faces in this meeting, which creates a different space. So thank you very much for your openness and for sharing your ideas in the different groups. I went to a couple of the groups to see what you were talking about. I was in incognito mode. I don't know if you saw me or not, but okay. Anyway, we don't have time for all of you to present, but I'm going to ask for a random group to present, one or two groups that want to share what you discussed. With perhaps one of the What are the difficulties of what you spoke? Daniel, Chapulín Colorado, please. Yes, are you volunteering? Yes. Okay. What was your group? We were group number 4. Okay, so we had a very interesting topic, which was with a private organization. Um, so the first part of the discussion, we used to clear ourselves. I mean, we know that perhaps from the stakeholders that are outside, or I mean, actors in crisis or risk situations, perhaps the private sector is the one that has the most experience in conducting risk analysis. They're doing this permanently, but generally this is exclusively aimed at the risk that their capitals and their investments are facing, and nothing else. So they know they know what risk is, they know how to calculate it, but perhaps it's a selfish risk calculus without taking into consideration everything that's around them. So we start to think about that. What can we do to do something that can actually motivate them in a participatory way to get together, to be a part of the group. And the most interesting thing was that, well, this first part of the discussion came from everyone that, the older people, so to say, from the project. But the ideas came from the new people. The ideas came from the new people. They're all our friends from the museums. So, well, there was an idea that was kind of to design a workshop where we can show the private sector all the other types of risks that exist, apart from the financial risk. What other risks are there, and that they can become aware of these additional risks. And other interesting ideas came afterwards. For instance, they say we could invite them, the representatives from the private sector, to take on tours through the city. We're thinking about they can these representatives see risk in a different light, so they can see them away from numbers, and particularly numbers that are next to money signs, so in a few words, to put a face on the risk. That's what a representative from the museums, that Daniela said. I mean, this would be interesting, kind of to sensibilize the big decision makers in the private sectors, so that they can see what other dimensions are part of this risk, and so they want to be a part of these groups. And lastly, to invite or design a way that in the private sector can also get to know the advantages they can receive by including a corporate responsibility practice, so that they can, identify new markets, for instance, where they can gain profit, but are alternative markets, but they can also be profitable. So that way we can attract them, so that they can make their investments by considering other types of risks. So that was our group. Sorry if I spoke too much. No, that was awesome, Chapulín. Someone else? Any of the other groups that wants to share a bit of your discussion with us? Marco, I see you raised your hand. Did I see you, or you were just waving? There's mosquitoes here, and I just wave sometimes to the camera. No, yeah. I took the comments. I mean, I wrote the comments down from my group, but it was a discussion among everyone, actually, and it was very interesting regarding the research with the municipal government, which is kind of what we are developing from, in Quito. We try to take on some of the ideas that you presented us, and of course, we thought about what would these big ideas would be, what would these theoretical starting points would be, that the academy starts to interact with the municipality. And as a first starting point, we thought that it was important to understand this as a political process, right? I mean, there's an interaction there. in which they said, the democratic exercise in and of itself ends being the perspective of the municipality ends up being the mobilizing idea that's above all. So the participations with different actors would actually allow us to generate new ideas based on different demands, different perspectives, different expectations, as Jeremy was mentioning. And as a second point, this big idea that's behind everything, has is related to a learning exercise where we have to learn what science means, from an academic standpoint, and in the public sector, in a more operational sense. It's more related to politics, actually. So, a relationship between the academy and the municipality has to do, on one side, on the role that the academy plays, and actually making this engagement, the community and in the participatory way, socializing the project, but also in the action, perspective. And we thought that there, by incorporating risk management, the theoretical idea that should be behind everything should be the participatory planning from a comprehensive understanding of risk, by considering the different actors as part of the solution. And unexpected outcomes, just kind of summarizing everything, we have the possibility of relating, or based on this relationship between the society and the academy, result that this tandem can have, and in our aims, to create a more sustainable project. This interaction was kind of thought based on presence-based terms. We kind of excluded COVID, and we kind of based everything on workshops where we can discuss and debate, and going in line with that democratic idea, and having democratic proposals and reaching consensus in the end. I think that's very important in the political process, and the idea of consensus is just a fundamental point. And, this involves identifying the actors that are already participating in these actions, and based on that, generating a community, a public-private community, so to say, that can actually work as the starting point to motivate other actors. In this case, for instance, the society itself. We didn't manage to create a more methodological aspect, but we think that the idea of this comprehensiveness needs to be a basic point. It needs to be incorporated in these debates, in these discussions, and also the idea of multidisciplinarity and risk as a central point. Thank you, Marco. We're a bit out of time. We weren't able to present everyone's ideas. But thank you, everyone. Marco, if you can stop sharing your screen. Thank you very much. So for everyone else, I hope these discussions were interesting, that you could discuss, most of the topics we saw today. And I'd like to go back to the beginning now and talk about the superpowers, superpowers that Jenny made us reflect about. This idea that everyone has knowledge, this metaphor that we wanted to raise today. And also the idea that it's not only us as researchers or people that work in museums or artists. There's many of us here today, but also the people in the communities, the municipality or the different actors from the private sector. Everyone already has knowledge. We're not working in empty spaces, with people that don't have any experience or knowledge. It's one of the basic points of the idea of participatory methodologies, that we create knowledge with people, with groups that are already contributing to the process, right? So today, Chapulín Colorado said it very clearly. It was very clearly stated in your group that despite the fact that you didn't know each other, the new people came in with their superpowers and really, contributed quite a bit with the project, and that's what we want to accomplish, through these exercises. The second point that I wanted to make is going back to the importance of what we want to accomplish through these methodologies. Not only participatory methodologies, but all the methodologies in this project, and that is producing new knowledge for risk reduction, multi-hazard risk reduction, based on theories, based on all the academic work that we have been doing, and on the knowledge from the different actors we are working with. But at the same time, and equal importance, we want to create impact, creating transformation, creating change at different levels. That's the second point. And third point, just to thank you all, thank you to our colleagues from the museums. I think that your presence has been quite interesting. You have brought your superpowers along with you, and you did, you're just saying something famous from Chapulín Colorado. And I mean, you have brought along a lot of your experience. We know you have a lot of experience, and I know that Malena and Elisa have already told you this, but we want to do a workshop, only with you, so that you can make a deeper presentation, present all your experience to us, so we can get to know that knowledge that you have, and then we can get to know each other a bit more, and we can actually include it in the methodology that we are planning. It's not that we are just planning them. Most of us are, already doing work, and we're almost out there in the field. And we want to know how we can incorporate your work to ours, and the other way around as well, how we can actually exchange knowledge. So I don't know if anyone has a final comment, something you want to say about today's session. What did you think? Something you learned before actually saying goodbye? Or is everyone okay? Chapulín, yes, please. No, just to say that I'm very glad, to see such a large group. I don't know how many there is today. 30, almost 40 people, yeah. That's, I think that's very nice. I think that it's amazing how the group just keeps getting larger and larger. That was just it. Thank you very much, Daniel. Chapulín is not his name. He's called Daniel. Someone else that wants to share something, I see in the chat you're saying something. No, everything's good. Once again, next workshop is going to take place next Friday, and in that workshop we're going to discuss a bit more the theory behind participatory methodologies. I think Marco's really going to like that, our colleague that's always driving us to theory. And yeah, that's going to provide that guide for us. And on the other hand, the role of art, how a participatory methodology for action and for change can be worked on through art. And Viviana is going to present that to us. And, it's nice that despite the fact that we're working, online, and that we can't be seeing each other face to face, we can see how everyone's, connected, being different countries in different places at different times. But it's very good that we can share this work among everyone, and that we can still have these dialogue spaces so that we can share our methodologies, our experiences in this project, Cities of Tomorrow. So that's everything. Thank you very much. I'm very, very glad to see you all. I expect to see more of you here next week, and I just encourage you to be ready for a new and different activity. Thank you and goodbye.
Cuídense.